agree to read that for us?
Good. Let's do it.
Oh, Dan, could you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I opened a document entitled user tips, and it wasn't the one that we used. So give me just a second to get to the right one. Kim, can you tell me, is it under Zoom or?
I sent it to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Then
It's attached in the email.
Thanks. Then we'll certainly be gathered up by the time I get to this.
How much longer do we have to keep doing? Do we have to do this for all eternity, Crystal?
I don't know. You know, Dan, I actually have it in front of me. Let me get started, if that's okay.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
All right. So good afternoon, committee members, liaisons, members of the public to the Partnership Grants meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you'd like to leave a comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature. To use a raise hand feature by phone, dial *9 on your phone's dial pad to raise your hand, and the same to lower your hand. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you'd like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. New going forward, all Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. A friendly reminder, this is a video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you. A couple of troubleshooting tips for those using Zoom on a computer. When on mute, holding down the space bar will temporarily unmute you. If you use your phone to dial into this meeting, please be sure your computer's microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback issues. Then while joining audio, Zoom via computer is highly recommended. If an individual loses audio, you can call in separately using the Zoom conference number that was provided to you and posted on the website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And for what it's worth, I've bookmarked that document. So the one that looked like the right one, I'm not going to go to that one anymore.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Crystal. Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Iskin, the chair of the Partnership Grants Committee. This is a Partnership Grants Committee meeting of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. Let's do a roll call.
Sure. Eric Iskin.
Present.
Will Bishelli.
Present.
Jason Galkin.
Here.
Dana Cruz. Joseph Lee. Christina Vanarelli.
Here.
All right, so we do have a quorum. I'll move on. Sorry, Judge Jaskell.
Here.
And then our liaisons presenters, Selena Copeland, Bonnie Huff.
I saw her say it.
I see we also have Kim Tida and Melanie Snyder from Judicial Council on the call as well. Thank you for joining us. All right, State Bar staff, Elizabeth I think she'll be joining a little bit. Danielle McRae.
Here.
Dan Pasmanic.
Oh, it's here.
Colleen Cito.
Here.
Brady Dewar.
Hi.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. We do have quorum for the meeting.
All right, terrific. So are there any members of the public on the line who wish to comment?
There's 3 people. There's a person on the phone. I don't know the name. There's a Jenny Farrell and a Mrs. B. I'm gonna let the caller talk.
Do any of those members of the public wish to offer comment at this point? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the consent items. The first and only of which is the approval for the meeting summary and action items from our last meeting, January 14th. Are there any comments on that action summary? Questions, comments, concerns? Do we have a motion for approval? Silence is deafening.
So moved.
There we go. Christina, I was just looking at you to see if we could get you to do that. That's great. I will second.
Okay, great. I'll go and take roll call. Iskin.
Yes.
Bishelli.
Yes.
Galkin.
Yes.
Cruz. Lee. Vanarelli.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Confirmed.
Okay, so let's now move on to what's really the heart of this meeting, which is the discussion and hopefully approval of the recommendations for Partnership Grant 2.0 funding proposals. So I'm going to let you, Crystal, I understand you have a PowerPoint and you can kind of get us going on this.
Sure. So we are an agenda item for A 1 and 2. Just wanted to provide an update. This is the Partnership Grant 2.0 funding recommendations, and this is the meeting mainly dedicated for this purpose. Just an overview of Partnership Grants 2.0 and that funding opportunity. There is 3.88 million available for funding. The exact amount is on the screen. As a reminder, all applicants who applied were subject to the same threshold eligibility requirements as all the rest of our partnership grant grantees and applicants. We utilize the same scoring rubric for the 2022 partnership grants, mostly because this was additional money that was available in the 2022 grant year. Oh, it looks like Joey has his hand raised. I'll continue going. And for PG 2.0, applicants were offered two options. Option 1 was to request supplemental funding for an existing 2022 project. Because the thought was for this option, grantees would spend down the monies concurrently with their funds that were just distributed early this year. The period would be shorter at a 9-month grant period. Grantees were also were limited to requesting up to their original requested amount in their 2022 applications. An example is if a grantee had applied for a $100,000 grant and was approved for $75,000 for the 2022 grant year, the supplemental funding under that option, they'd only be able to apply up to $25,000. And option 2, that's a new application or substantial expansion to an existing project, 21-month grant period for this option, April 1 through December 31st of 2023. Because of the extended time period and scope of projects that we were looking to really promote with this funding opportunity, the RFP listed a recommended minimum funding request of $75,000 and a maximum of $300,000. I'm going to provide an overview of what we receive for each grant, but here's just a little bit of the breakdown monetarily of the amount available and the amount requested. As you can see, compared to the 3.88 that is available for PG 2.0, we had a total requested amount of 4.7, so almost $1 million more than we have available. As a reminder, the application deadline was December 17. We received 28 applications total, 11 supplemental and 17 new applications. Those related amounts are on the gray area in the box here. And then I'll provide a breakdown so far, but I just wanted to pause to see if there's any questions with the Partnership Grant 2.0 funding opportunity. Hearing none, I'll just move forward. So in terms of the option 1 supplemental applications, I mentioned that we received 11 applications. We received them from 10 of our current grantees, totaling $206,000. The supplemental amount range, actually requested range was from $4,000 to $40,000. Again, due to that restriction of requesting up to the total funding amount, it's a lower range when you look at the new application range. As a reminder, for this review process, the PG committee delegated authority to an ad hoc review team comprised of staff, all of who are are on this call, as well as Christina Venarelli as a point of contact for a committee member perspective, just to keep her apprised of any updates during the review process of the supplemental applications. The reasons for supplemental funding really varied across the 11 applications. Some of the main reasons are listed here. Staff salary increases. In some instances, the project anticipated increased project deliverables, and then also demonstrated improvements to their existing application. This is primarily responsive to the scoring rubrics that were the scoring rubrics from the 2022 applications. And so the grant applicants for supplemental funding provided some additional information or may have tried to describe their a certain rubric category a little bit better. After the review of the supplemental applications and follow up with the applicants, the review team's recommendation is to approve all PG 2.0 supplemental funding requests. So at this point, I'm going to shift screens a little bit and share the individual breakdown so everyone can take a look, and we'll happy to answer any questions. So I'm going to separate out option 1 and option 2. They're just very different, but the request will be in whole, and I'll consolidate both together. But just for purposes for our discussion and how we're approaching this, we figured we'll do option 1 first and then option 2. So as I mentioned, for supplemental applications, 206,000 was requested of the 3.88 million available for funding. The organizations and project titles are listed here. In the gray boxes, these are just some reminder data points of what they originally requested, how much they were awarded, the counties they served, and their rubric score breakdown. Supplemental requested are in column U over here. And then this yellow column highlights the review team's recommendation, which is to match or to meet the full amount of the supplemental requested amounts.
Was there any any controversy about any of them?
Based on the review team, no. I think we found that the descriptions, and after having one-on-one conversations with the organizations, they really understood maybe where there was room for improvement on the rubric. So it felt like a really good learning opportunity for the grantees to better understand the rubric. So we anticipate that this process will hopefully have stronger applications even for the 2023 grant year. So no controversies to report on.
So we had 11 of them that sought this additional funding. I take it there were others that were not fully funded as a result of round 1, right? That did not seek supplemental funding for one reason or another.
Correct. Back in August, when the committee and the commission discussed the distribution plan, hypothetically, we calculated that there was maybe a little bit over 500,000 that would be available with this funding opportunity. So of that, these are the grantees that decided to seek the supplemental funding.
Okay. Are there any questions from committee members or comments from staff? Because we will be asking for approval of this recommendation, which is to fund all of them at the requested supplemental amounts. Because if not, we're going to move on to was it 2.0 or 2.2 or whatever the right number?
Option 2 for the new applications.
All right, option 2 of 2.0.
Really quickly, it just looks like that mostly they're requesting the funding amount that they didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
And so
right.
Just filling in the gaps. And none of these we had concerns with last year during the process.
Oh yeah, all of these projects were funded. So that's something we wanted to highlight as well.
Yeah.
The supplemental application was significantly shorter than the new app just because they had gone through the process. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. My inclination is to approve all of these, but I don't want to bias too much against the on one side. So
I just like to comment, like in response to the questions that have been raised, I think a lot of these applications reflected real thoughtful responses to the reasons they hadn't been fully funded, and they addressed concerns that had been raised previously.
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Joe. I'm just trying to understand what the 3.88 million number for the total amount available refers to.
Yeah, so that's the total amount of the partnership grants 2.0. So I just wanted to have a contrast of the 206 in relation to the total amount available. So it's really a smaller percentage than the new applications comprise of.
So there wasn't a specific amount allocated for the supplemental funds then, okay.
No.
Well,
We
then
treat-
I have the same view, which is it looks to me from 40,000 feet or so that we should approve these as listed on the slide.
Okay.
You know what, Crystal, do you want to, I guess you framed a resolution that embraces both options 1 and 2, right? And since
Yeah.
could we separately talk about option 1 since we've now completed the discussion, or do you want to go, maybe we should do option 2 because it's the same pot of money, and if anybody has any
I
concerns.
defer to the committee, but overall, this will be this was the proposed recommendation, but it's definitely, we can break it apart. It's all under PG 2.0 funding, and I know that we just wanted to draw the distinction for today's meeting. I don't know if that's needed for on the commission level.
Let's move on and just think about treating them all as one, but we'll just put a pin in this one, and people can hopefully remember that the recommendation is to approve all these requests for supplemental funding under option 1.
Okay, great. So I'll continue on with an overview of the option 2, which were the new applications, as well as substantial expansions to existing projects. We received 17 applications from 13 qualified legal services projects, totaling 4.5 million. The exact amount is on the screen. Supplemental amount requested was significantly higher, again, due to that suggested funding range in the RFP. So 119,000 to 300,000 requests. That was the range of what was submitted. As a reminder, again, for this review process, the PG committee delegated authority to an ad hoc review team comprised of staff, and then Eric Iskin was our committee sort of point person during this process, who also reviewed all of the proposals. In terms of the review process overview, as you recall, at our January 14 meeting, we did an initial calibration of 3 selected proposals. The review team took the input and the feedback from the committee during that meeting and applied it as the review team reviewed the remaining 14 applications. We scheduled 4 subsequent calibration sessions to talk through 4 to 5 proposals at a time. And then, we calibrated our own scores, looked at the total spread, and made adjustments just to ensure that there was consistent scoring and application of the rubric categories and their intent. One thing that we also wanted to raise from carrying over from the January 14 meeting was funding priority. I know that was a topic for discussion at our last meeting. After taking a look at the RFP, and also in consideration of how we had applied it in the 2022 grant year, we did utilize timing as the mechanism for funding priority, as opposed to project quality. So therefore, all of the projects scored either a 4 or a 5. The distinguishing factor was whether or not it was a brand new proposal, a brand new project, or expansion to existing one. So that was we just wanted to bring that back to the committee. We had a range of from the 17 applications of points ranged from 68 was the lowest scoring proposal and 98 as the highest. This factors in additional innovation points, and the average score was 83 points. After taking a look at our full spread, we looked at other considerations, substantive areas, county served, any other innovative aspects, and then that's where we developed our tentative funding recommendations that now I'll share on the spreadsheet. While I do that, if the committee members has any questions about the process, feel free to ask, but I'll share the spreadsheet now. Oops.
You need 20/20 vision at least to read this.
So I'll show
screen.
I'll show the bigger screen, and then I'll hide any columns. But as I did want to point out, this is how we approach the 2022 recommendations. So I have additional columns if the committee wants to look at them. I have partner courts, counties served, substantive areas, if that's something that the committee wants to look at. It's here. So this is an abbreviated version, so I can make it much smaller. All right. Walking through this a little bit, you have the organizations, project title, and then these are the selection criteria subcategories and how the points were assigned. Again, 4.5 million in requested funding amount. If the committee is in approval agreement with the review team's recommendation to fully fund the supplemental applications, that leaves us with 3,674,237 to distribute. So basically that's 800,000 to cut. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more now that I've talked about a little bigger. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, the spread for the PG 2.0 proposals was 68 to 98. And then just making sure that we were factoring in and fully spending the available funding, the review team's approach for its funding recommendation utilized the 83 points, which was the average, as a sort of a threshold for whether or not a project received full funding or maybe had a deduction or maybe not funded at all. So as you can see, these projects here that scored 83 and above, the review team is recommending to be 100% funded of their full total requested amount. Those below 83 but above 70 the review team is recommending 85% funding of the requested amount. And then after that initial allocation and with our math, there was an additional 20,000 or so. So the committee, the review team then looked at counties served and so decided to maybe recommend putting additional monies towards projects that were serving Riverside as these other projects were serving LA County. So just for geographic diversity in terms of the total proposals, that's where additional monies were. So additional 9,700, 9,800 or so for each for these last two projects. Did want to highlight that there were two projects that the review team the review team's recommendation is to not recommend funding for. To note, these projects both scored under 70 points in looking at in applying the rubric scores and the categories. And I'll talk a little bit about that next. Just pausing to see if there's any questions about the approach or if we wanted to talk about the two projects that the review team is recommending to not fund this go around.
Do you think we could give, before we get to the ones that we're recommending not funding, I think we could maybe give an example or two of the ones that we are recommending funding, just so they have a sense for what these projects are about.
Yeah. So the types of projects that or proposed projects that were submitted, I felt were very similar to what the committee saw during its initial calibration. There were projects similar to, for example, mental health advocacy services with their mental health court and that project in which they were looking to holistically serve their clients by identifying ancillary services. There was another project similar from Neighborhood Legal Services that sought to serve a targeted population in its project. In addition, there were other projects that sought to expand their existing projects, even though they were not partnership grant funded, but operating under in association with a self-help center, adding a remote aspect to it. So there would be a remote staff in addition to the on-site staff that would be providing services to self-represented litigants. If any of the review team wants to chime in, feel free. I know we looked at a lot of proposals in a very small timeline. So if there's a type that's popping out, feel free to chime in.
So what these projects typically did was they would fund 300,000 was a very typical requested amount. You can see that most of them requested that, some of them requested less. And they would typically ask for funding for maybe an attorney with a little bit of supervision from just a staff attorney, full-time staff attorney with some supervision from the organization's directing attorney, plus a paralegal. So that was the typical profile, attorney plus a paralegal to maybe to provide, and they would typically provide remote services. That was a big theme in this group of proposals, to provide remote services so people could access the services without having to go to the courthouse, and also in view of the pandemic. And they addressed a variety of issues like the bridge to self-help. I think Crystal was just kind of mentioning that as somewhat analogous to the mental health project that we talked about as a group before. This one was a project that was targeted to the disabled community, to help them with a range of issues that community faces. And I forget what court it was affiliated with. Was LASC, maybe? I'm not, I was
neighborhood legal services.
Yeah, so it's probably it was LASC. And let's see, the community court expansion #2, Legal Aid of Marin, that's an innovative kind of a project that is in Marin. It operates in various locations plus remote, and it's designed to help people deal with, issues that impact people's life, minor things, but that can be a big deal, like traffic tickets and getting infractions cleared up and things like that. So that was that one. So there were just a number of them like that. There was one. Let's see, where's the appellate project? Where did that list?
Public Council has an appellate clinic expansion as well.
That was interesting. That was a project that is proposed by Public Council here in Los Angeles to assist people with aspects of appeals, people who need help, for example, assembling the record, structuring their brief. It's not going to be intensive work on the brief, but it will be help for people to just kind of get their filings together, getting the record correct in a manner that will be acceptable to the court. And that was a project that was viewed with great favor by the Court of Appeal. It was very helpful to help people that are in pro per to get their appeals lined up.
That was the project that I did for 9 years before.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Right. So I was the founding directing attorney who did that. And I'm so excited to see that it's being funded because we had to stop, partly because we ran out of funding at Public Council for that. I mean, it didn't completely stop. There's an attorney, a wonderful attorney who's working at it on a contract basis currently. So in addition to helping on a self-help basis, it does in certain cases look for pro bono counsel for meritorious cases, and it refers certain cases to counsel who might want to come in not on a pro bono basis, but if it's a paying case.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that perspective. Yeah, we thought it was a really exciting project. So Will, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Really quickly, I wanted to echo your remarks on the community court with Legal Aid Marin. I remember getting to review this project 2 years ago, and it was very exciting, and I think something that could be held up as a model for other locations. If committee members are interested in seeing something that I think takes a holistic approach, this one's a cool one. And then my second question was a bigger picture question on the strategy here. With regard to the 85% cutoff. When we do that with our smaller amounts, it's a much smaller real number difference. But here it's about 50,000, right? Or $45,000 less on the 300K projects. And I was wondering if there was a discussion and thought in whether that would be really detrimental to these programs actually getting done, or whether, like with our regular funding amounts, it wouldn't be showstoppers for these programs. And if we could hear a little on that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say though, well, because of the Partnership Grant 2.0 funding and the very aggressive timeline, we unfortunately didn't have, by the time we came up with the tentative funding amounts and the review team's recommendations, there was not enough turnaround time because we were still wrapping up on follow-up with the applications. It was a very intensive 4 weeks of application review, but in terms of the impact of these projects, like we don't, I don't, unfortunately don't have that additional insight, just because of the timing constraints.
Okay, I think that makes sense because it was really compressed. I guess
Yes.
I am I'm curious what the programs will say and whether that might change things up because it's a higher real number difference there. But I guess as a starting point, this certainly seems to make sense since we've used this strategy with other years of funding.
Yeah, so we established a quality cutoff where we thought the projects that were really outstanding, like the appellate court project, deserved 100% funding. And then the question was, how far do you extend the remaining funds that we have? We could have continued down the line of funding everybody 100%, but then that would have cut off more projects at the bottom. We actually felt so the only projects that are cut off, and Crystal was about to get to this before I stopped her, but there were really only two that we're recommending for zero funding. One of which is a remote unlawful detainer clinic for neighborhood legal services in the San Gabriel Valley, which of course provides really important services, but we in this program, we funded 3 other projects of neighborhood legal services, some of them fully, some of them at 85%, which to some extent overlapped with the services provided by this one. So we thought this was a little bit duplicative here. And that's why we felt comfortable saying, okay, look, we funded 3 of your 4 projects. All of them are in LA. They're providing a wide range of services, including UD. This one seemed a little bit duplicative, so we felt comfortable cutting it off. And then there was a UC Davis project, which is also an appellate project. And Judge Jaskell, you may have some comment on this one. It's an interesting project, but we decided not to fund it because this is a little different than the public counsel project, I think, at least the way we read it. This was a project that proposed to provide the full 9 yards of pro bono service for an appeal. In other words, they would actually help draft the brief and see it all the way through, which is great. But their impact was like 3 appeals or something, or 6 appeals. It was really low. And it just seemed, compared to the others that were serving hundreds, thousands of people, even though it was somewhat innovative, it just seemed like a really low impact, particularly because, and we might have viewed it differently if they were picking and choosing like really high impact cases, like if they had 6 cases that, they were kind of ferreting out that might have had a high impact, but they didn't really seem to be doing that. They were sort of ordinary civil rights employment kinds of cases where there was an appeal. And again, it's a good service. We don't mean to say it's not, but the impact was just so distinctly lower than all of the other projects that we decided not to fund it.
And Eric, I just wanted to add on, I will say also because of the timing of the committee's decisions today, and then as you know, the 2023 partnership grants are actually available to applicants on SMART's, through our grants platform. If the committee is in agreement with the review team's recommendations, these 2 applicants will be contacted and encouraged to apply for 2023 partnership grant funding. That is an available avenue that is pretty immediate in terms of being able to apply for a funding that would start early next year. So I just wanted to raise that as it's not all is not lost, and hopefully they'll apply for 2023, and then we can provide any feedback, especially maybe UC Davis with particular notes on how to improve their proposal if they do decide to apply.
This is Joe, and forgive me, I feel like I'm still coming up to speed on the commission's practices here, but I'm wondering if we would even consider, before making a decision as to, for instance, the 2 that we're talking about not funding, giving them an opportunity to address our concerns. So for instance, letting Davis know that although it appears that the idea is a really good one, it seems to reach only 6 individual cases, and just confirm that we have that right and give them an opportunity to tell us if we're proceeding on a misunderstanding.
Yeah, Joe, we did actually contact with all of these applicants after our weekly calibration sessions. We promptly sent follow-up and received follow-up responses back. So UC Davis did confirm it was 6 that they were anticipating, and these were by referral. So they did confirm it, and they did explain that the services were as Eric described in terms of more comprehensive. But again, project impact, it's 6, and then projects that we are recommending funding are in the hundreds and thousands. So I think overall approach, that's what might have deterred us from recommending funding, as reflected in their lower total rubric score. Sorry, Judge Jaskol?
I'm wondering what the partner court is, which partner court the UC Davis grant was working with.
I think it was the, what is the district, the DCA covering Sacramento?
It's the 3rd Appellate District.
California 3rd Appellate, 23 counties.
So that's interesting, because when we started the appellate clinic in Los Angeles, the 2nd district made very clear to us that we could not, that the clinic itself could not represent people. So I'm just wondering how, how the 3rd district approached that issue. But if we're not going to fund it, I guess it's kind of moot.
Well, you know, the 3rd district is working with them on other cases, and they're working with other courts as well. This is not a unique service to this proposal. UC Davis is deep in this work in other courts.
Okay.
So I think what's happening here is they're working with self-represented litigants to help them ghostwrite and prepare for hearings and that sort of thing, but not appearing as attorneys of record. I don't know if that goes over a line that the 2nd district drew somewhere else, or if they're still within.
Oh, so did I misstate that? So they are not proposing to be counsel of record?
I know that in some courts they are acting as counsel of record, but I don't believe they intend to do so under this grant.
Yeah, that's what it says. Represent themselves in the project abstract.
It's really interesting because I've seen law students argue in the 9th Circuit, so they allow it. Not sure why the 2nd district wouldn't.
Oh, the issue is neutrality. If it's a service that's provided in conjunction with the court, our guidelines for self-help centers indicate that we shouldn't be drafting motions or engaging in that kind of legal analysis and writing. So that's the distinction, that if it's a service that's offered by the court, the goal is to remain neutral.
That's fascinating, because these are referrals from the court, and these people are getting really deep.
You can certainly make referrals, but for that program that's based at the court, the goal is, if the next person, you have to be able to assist both sides, right? And the more that you do legal analysis, writing, that becomes really, much more of an advocacy role appropriately than.
Well, this one was going to be doing legal writing. I mean, I understood they were going to get pretty deeply involved in the brief, which is why they were.
And that's, I think, Judge Jaskol's question, that if in fact they do resubmit, or however this goes, I think that it would really need to be sort of worked through with the court in terms of making sure the court was clear or was comfortable with that role.
Yeah, this is Joe again, and I'm sorry. I see that William has raised his hand, and maybe
You
I'm
were
supposed
first,
to be
my
doing
man.
that.
You were first. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. So I hear, and by the way, Crystal, thank you very much for explaining that we did reach out to them and confirm that we're we're making this judgment on the right facts. I think that's great, right? So that it's consistent with due process. I wonder if there's a second aspect to the UC Davis program, which is it's not just about helping the litigants and also about, well, I guess there's two other aspects. One is that it would be helping litigants who are handpicked by the court. So the court will have made some determination that we'd really like to have assistance provided to these particular individuals. So there's a judicial benefit, and there's also an educational component. And I think that's actually the key aspect of this program, which is this is training law students. It's a clinic where they're learning how to write appellate briefs and how to interact with clients and the like. So I'm not sure it's fair. I'm not sure it's apples and oranges to say, well, they're only serving 6 indigent clients and these other programs have many more, because that's actually, if anything, somewhat of a secondary goal of this program. I'm not sure that would lead me to come out differently and say that we ought to be funding it, but I wanted to flag those issues as I review it.
Will?
Yeah, I think I echo Joe there, and that, I guess I don't see in the proposal anywhere indication that they're really aiming for impact in terms of getting decisions that would have a larger impact than just this one individual. And I feel like that would be a key component on this one. And I wonder if that's a distinction between this program and the public counsel appellate program, because I haven't looked at the public counsel appellate program, but maybe we could hear a little bit about what distinguishes these two.
Well, I would have tried to answer, and I will, but actually I'm going to step back and let Judge Jaskell answer, because she'll probably give a better answer than I would.
No, not necessarily, but so, the public counsel project developed over time, and actually toward the end of my time there, we had reached an agreement of sorts with the court, with the Second Appellate District, that the Second Appellate District would, or at least had the ability to refer cases to us for representation, somewhat like this project or this proposal. And if, I don't know if that actually happened after I left, but so I think the idea of having the Court of Appeal refer cases to this clinic or whatever it is that the justices themselves think merit, full representation, I think that's an excellent idea. But the clinic that we did with public counsel was mostly a self-help clinic, but also found pro bono counsel only after an exhaustive review of the case to see if it had potential merit. There was not really an educational component or no educational component to the public counsel clinic. I'm wondering how appropriate it is to use partnership grant funds to help an educational institution educate its students. But so I think the ideas for the UC Davis clinic is great, but there are the issues that we've been discussing about fairly low impact, and then I also wonder if it's appropriate to use partnership grant funds this way.
Yeah, I guess I agree with Judge Jaskell. I mean, project impact is one of our key dimensions that we are supposed to be looking at here. And we are looking at it. And I do share Judge Jaskell's concerns about, although education is obviously an important thing, but that's not really the purpose of this legislative funding here. The purpose is to alleviate poverty and help people who need legal services who can't get it. And I'm not aware, maybe we can pull up the application. I don't remember anything about the court highlighting or flagging these cases as being particularly worthy of attention.
It isn't in the application as I recall, but my site visits to this program where I've talked with the teachers who work with these students, at least in years past, indicate that the students perform high quality work and the judges love having them involved in cases. So they get a lot of applications and get to be a little choosy about which ones they pick. So they don't just get whatever gets thrown over the transom, but they're also the really significant civil rights cases actually do tend to get somebody to represent people. These tend not to be those. And just
Eric, it's Joe. I think I may have made that suggestion, and it's just based on reading the attachments to the meeting materials, which state that the court would refer indigent individuals who meet the financial criteria for legal representation to the CRC. So I was inferring that the court would pick cases that it thought were appropriate for representation. It's possible that they're only doing it on the basis of their financial criteria.
Yeah, I would also say that on the project impact numbers, the public council project had way larger impact than this one. The numbers were, Crystal, do you remember what the numbers were? But it was.
Well, it's kind of almost an apples and oranges thing. I mean, we at the appellate self-help clinic that public council does, you can easily see, several people a day because you're basically helping them understand, how to file a notice of appeal or how to designate the record, which is, if it's just that kind of service, it's much more limited than full representation. So it is kind of hard to compare.
They're going to be doing workshops. They're talking about services, I think, to 1,000 individuals, but they're not going to be, deeply engaged with very many of them.
No, that's true. You're right. You're right. And it is apples and oranges, but they're nevertheless extremely important services that are of great benefit to the court, to have somebody actually helping people get the notice of appeal in proper form and timely filed and get the record properly designated. I mean, you're relieving the court of a huge burden.
That's exactly right. That's why the second district was so enthusiastic about it. I mean, by the time I left, we had, people, sitting in the corridors at the Court of Appeal trying to get into the clinic. So the way it's working right now, I know only a small percentage of people are getting help. And it looks like, I didn't read the application, but if they're planning to hire a full-time attorney, that would really take it to another level.
I think it was at 3,700 anticipated individual services was the number, around that number, if I'm looking correctly.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Even bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to confirm just with the course of this discussion. So UC Davis, their PG Partnership Grant Project, we're talking about closely, but in terms of neighborhood legal services and the reasons Eric had mentioned before, they had submitted 4 proposals. We're funding 3 of them. Just to make sure that we weren't, if there were any concerns that the committee had with the recommendation to maybe not recommend funding for PG 2.0, but again, we'll encourage them to apply for 2023 partnership grants. Is there any thoughts or reactions to that recommendation?
What were the others that were neighborhood legal services? I think the Bridge to Self-Help was one of them.
Yeah, the Bridge to Self-Help, which was the highest scoring project, just to mention. They also have HEJ Navigating a Remote World, and then an International Hague Remote Self-Help. Both of these are expansions to existing projects.
On the Navigating a Remote World, it's kind of a funny title. It doesn't tell you much of anything. I think that was generally offering remote services to the courthouses that they support across a broad range of services, including UD.
Which was sort of covering what the San Gabriel one was doing too.
And by the way, the Hague Project, that's another interesting one. It's a kind of specialized sort of unique thing. They were offering help in international service of process under the so-called Hague Convention for, like family law issues, like if there's a spouse in Mexico or something like that, and, you've initiated a divorce proceeding or custody or whatever, and you need to serve that person, you have to employ this Hague Convention, which is pretty technical and complicated, and would be difficult for most lawyers to navigate, frankly, who aren't familiar with it, but certainly difficult for a self-represented litigant. And this clinic is specializing in that.
I would say overall, it was really exciting to read 17 brand new proposals, because I know we're used to seeing more or less a similar batch of applicants year after year. So the diversity of the projects in terms of substantive areas and what they're trying to do with implementing technology and remote services was really great to see some thoughtful proposals with this batch. So yeah.
Kudos to Crystal for this outreach, for framing this, for getting people, not just to notice the hook in the water, but to bite for it. It was a big change from prior years.
I had some questions on the UD. LA County obviously has a bit of a housing crisis, as everyone knows. What I actually am confused about is why their budget is so huge for what looks like remote services. Was there something? The NLS remote UD self-help for San Gabriel Valley.
So that budget, I will say, during the review teams, we did note that, as you can see, all of our NLS projects are seeking the same requested amount. So the budget in the remote UD San Gabriel Valley is identical to the other three projects. We looked a little closer in terms of the personnel and non-personnel breakdown. I think one consideration is that it's a 21-month grant period. So salary-wise, we had read one FTE, and then you did a little bit of math, and it does factor into, is consistent with their salary charts. It's just an extended period. It's almost a 2-year grant cycle, which is why I think some of the numbers look larger than we're typically used to seeing for our partnership grants.
And the feeling amongst the reviewers was that the impact of their other proposals was greater than what would be from the UD self-help for San Gabriel Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And it's somewhat duplicative, Will. And also there were a number of these projects that address UD type issues in LA. So this one seemed like, just a little bit, I don't want to say superfluous, but a little bit duplicative. Yeah,
well, I definitely would. I appreciate some consolidation of legal aid, because it's really hard to call everybody when you're looking for help. So if this was the weakest of the group, no tears will be shed here.
I'd like to reemphasize that each of these was independently scored by each of us. So it wasn't like we looked at them all together and decided which one we liked best. We looked at each of them, decided what we thought about them, and then looked at them all together. So these are kind of on their own merits, I hope.
Just a reminder, I just scroll a little bit here, the reminder approach of what the review team said, 83, which was the average points and above, 100% funding, and then 85%. Just checking to see if the committee, maybe we can start putting numbers in this this red column here, if there's any agreement, and then we can revisit if there's any maybe adjustments in percentages of we can take a closer look. But does this committee agree with maybe fully funding those who scored the average score or more at 100%?
I have two thoughts, if I may. This is Joe. The first is I guess my own inclination would not be to not fund the UC Davis program. And I get the point about impact, and I think it's a fair question as to whether the educational objective of that or component of that program is within our scope. And I want to hear more about that and hear others' thoughts about that. But I wonder if the program seems to have some merit to me, including because the Third District Court of Appeal would like this to happen, and I like to help out Court of Appeal justices where we can, if that's an appropriate objective. So that's point one, and then point two, if I may, is I wonder if we considered allocating money based on the score, or does that, so somebody who gets 98 would get a slightly higher percentage than a program that gets 97 and also somewhat higher than 92, or whether that, as opposed to having buckets and right where some get 100% up to this point, I can see pros and cons and just wonder if we considered that and why we came out this way.
Yeah, so in terms of applying like the rubric scores and the funding recommendations, so really when the rubric was introduced in 2022, it's really it was a tool to help guide the review process. So we didn't tie the scores because there were other considerations when you looked at the span of the project, such as substantive areas, continuity issues and planning and efforts, which why we didn't want to be constrained with the scores. For 2022, we specifically looked at, I think, funding priority as an additional consideration. So if we kept things tied to the scores, unfortunately, like that may impact us without and be more flexible than utilizing as one point of consideration versus like the only point of consideration. I think Bonnie has her hand raised, and I'll stop talking for now.
I'm sorry, I'm still having a really hard time figuring out how the UC Davis proposal is a self-help proposal. I get it that the court wants it, but I don't get that if law students are preparing briefs on behalf of students, that is a self-help proposal. I think it's a great project. I obviously funded by other sources, but I'm sorry. So what was that discussion or was there any discussion with UC Davis about that?
I felt like when we got the proposal that it was hard to approach because the proposed services sound good, but it was unlike the other proposals that we had. So I think maybe the review team did it. I mean, anyone of the review team can speak up too, but it was hard to measure it in terms of how the other approaches were because they were fairly similar. So if there were substantial red flags, Bonnie, I probably should have raised it with you before, but there was very complex timeline. Yeah.
Josh has a comment perhaps.
So I was thinking that the Davis project is proposing something similar to what UCLA is already doing. UCLA has, I don't remember what the class is, but it's a class in which I believe it's dependency cases, dependency appeals are referred to UCLA. And then there are a couple of, I think they're adjunct professors. I think they might be from Melviny and Myers. And they supervise the students as they draft the briefs in these cases referred by the Court of Appeal. And that was independent of public counsel. They were not connected at all. But again, UCLA seems to be funding that some other way. And I just don't know that the legislature would want some of the partnership grant money going to UC that gets other funding.
Oh, Dan and then Jason.
Oh, Jason first.
Okay.
I share some of the same concerns Bonnie does. I'm perhaps a step back about the attorney-client relationship. I think what is important to note for me in looking over the Davis program, despite it being locally significant because we're in the third DC here, it's that they want to establish an attorney-client relationship during an appeal, and there's no contemplation of alternative resources to refer those people whom they have conflicts to, right? So that means they're representing one side and the other side has no access to legal assistance if they're also self-represented. And that seems really problematic to me. Whereas the others that I've quickly scanned through, the other grant recipients who have attorney-client relationships if they can't represent the client that's referred because of a conflict, there are other resources out there they will be referring those would-be clients to, so that they can get, you know, assistance that's relevant to them. Now that probably would reflect the availability or lack thereof of legal assistance on appeal within the third DCA's jurisdiction. But I still think it's a problem if it's not contemplated as to what to do with the other side, because there's always the other side.
They did answer that in their application. I'll just note, because I think that's a good concern.
Well, let me also say, I just looked through the application again briefly, and I did not see in the application a strong sense that this is a project that the third district really wants to have funded. As opposed to the public count, not that they don't want to have it funded, but I didn't see in the application this notion that the court really has requested this, which is very different than the public counsel appeals project, where throughout the application, you get a very strong feeling that this is a project the Court of Appeal really wants, would be very helpful.
Well, Justice Lori Zielon actually was the leading force on the public counsel project. So it was actually initiated more or less by the Court of Appeal itself.
Yeah, Will?
On that same note, it says that they're going to upload their letter of support from the court, but it doesn't appear in the application at all. Did they ever submit that?
It was so in part because of the short time frame to submit the application. That was something, if they were recommended for funding, that we would ensure that we had before moving forward the recommendation. So no, we don't have that as of today.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
that's when they uploaded on December 16th. They were like, or I guess I'm not sure the exact date, but yeah, December 17th, they were like, oh yeah, it's coming. And apparently they didn't send it in. So that doesn't show much excitement from the partner court on that one. But I guess I wanted to note that if the intention, and I think reading through the application it is to help with impact appeals, where it's a civil rights issue and you're going up a bit against big corporations or big employers that have a lot of money, I definitely see the value, but there are some key pieces missing here.
Well, and this is Joe again. I do think it's a fair point that it's not really consonant with our mission to be funding UC programs, right? I mean, there are alternative sources of funding for that, and we're really more focused on aiding the indigent and having an impact there. So, and as Eric pointed out in his opening remarks, that aspect of this program is quite limited. So maybe in terms of the criteria that we need to be focused on, given the purpose of the IOLTA funds in the first place, the fact that they're assisting only a very limited number of individuals is really the most relevant, or even the only relevant criterion. And the fact that there are these tangential benefits to the Court of Appeal and to the educational institution and to the students involved, as great as that is not really what we're seeking to remediate with the funds that are made available to us. So I guess I ultimately come out thinking, well, I'll withdraw the question. I think it's been a really helpful discussion. It's helped educate me, and I guess I come out ultimately, subject to others' views, thinking that it probably is the right call.
Dan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of reflect on Bonnie's comment that this really doesn't look at all to me like a self-help project, but I think that we are restricted by Budget Act language that says we're working with legal assistance for pro per litigants. So as long as they're in pro per, I think I'm not sure where to draw the line in terms of how much can be done. So it's a challenging question that is raised and one that isn't directly addressed, I think, by the Budget Act language.
So Crystal, to answer your question, which you tried to have us answer 15 minutes ago, which is how much money do we want to give or recommend for these projects? Well, let me take a shot at the easy button first before we do the hard button. Easy button would be, does anyone think that we could maybe recommend the funding amounts that are set forth in column R and transpose them to column S? And unless somebody has a strong view that maybe 40,000 from this one should go to that one or something like that. Does anyone have a view like that? If you do, we should discuss it. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to confirm something before answering that question.
Okay.
Have we, Crystal, have we confirmed, I think Will raised the point earlier about the viability of the programs to be successful at the reduced funding level?
At
They
this,
were,
so at this point, unfortunately, no, like just because we had developed the review, we wanted to wait till we got all the scores and then look at them in whole before making the funding recommendations. Just because of the time frame, we typically built in time and ask them about potential decreased awards and impact on deliverables. I'll have to double check, but that's something I can just follow up with. I can reach out to these projects individually, just to inform them of what the potential recommendation is and ask them for that follow-up. But for this meeting, unfortunately, no, I don't have that information.
Yeah, would these cuts, I guess the projects could make the cuts wherever they wanted, but they could end up being largely to the non-personnel and administrative pieces of the project, given the amounts.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's once the recommended funding recommendations are provided to them, they submit a budget revision and just showing where they reallocate the monies to reflect the funding recommendation amount. Danielle, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if it's helpful context, for HP3, we did have a little bit of time and we were able to go back to programs and say, this is what we're considering recommending as your funding level, to get program sense of what that would do to their deliverables. And like Eric said, the vast majority of them chose to take that out of admin or non-personnel costs because they were trying to impact the deliverables as little as possible, particularly because they still wanted to have a strong and compelling project as the committee and commission were making those ultimate decisions. So that there were some in, it's a different set of funding, it's maybe a different set of circumstances, but in that case, at least, there were very few projects that took it out of places that would significantly impact their deliverable numbers. It was largely non-personnel and admin costs.
so with those questions answered, I would move to approve the proposal for the funding recommendations.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment as well. Although I do have that concern about the big chunk of money cutting and how much project impact might get cut as well, which is what everybody was talking about. And if we heard back from programs that it meant significant cuts in the work that they were going to be able to do, I would have serious reservations about that. But I don't know how to address that in this meeting, given the time frame we have. So I'm open to hearing if there is concern there, or should we plow ahead and then address it at the next commission meeting if they come back and say that there were significant cuts in the services that they'll be able to provide.
Well, Crystal, just to respond to what Will just said, what if we were to approve this? What would the next step be? That you would go back to the projects and tell them what the approval is, or what the provisional approval is? This is before the full commission looks at it. And then I guess if somebody came back to you and said, oh my God, we really just can't effectively do this project with this 15% cut, would there be something we could do about that as a committee? I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to get that response.
Yeah, it's not So for 2022, for some additional context for PG, I think we had significantly higher cuts, such as 30 to 40%, primarily for projects that were older than 5 years. So I think in my mind, 15% over a 21-month span, there's definitely some wiggle room to figure out maybe it's one less video that they're producing, or because we asked these projects to dream big, really, and the fact that we're able to potentially fully fund almost half of them, I feel like it's pretty solid. So I mean, I can get the actual anticipated impact of that in between. It's tricky now because the commission meets on March 11th. So I don't anticipate major upsets based on the amounts. Really ask for be as innovative as you'd like, and we'll try and accommodate that with available funding. That's always the restriction. As a reminder, there's no appeals process as well. So I don't foresee any projects not accepting the award.
In terms of historical precedent, similar approaches to this have been used in the past just to sort of get everything down to the right level. And it's pretty unusual for an organization to say, we can't even do this for the amount of money you're giving us. Certainly for the amounts that are on this chart, it would be a surprise to me if that happened.
It would be a shock to me. People don't normally turn down this kind of money.
I don't think they turn down the money. It's just we're evaluating them based on the promise of the budget that they provided. Of course, they're going to take it no matter what. It's really, would it change the scores and the level of funding?
We
And I guess I
understand that
don't
there may
really.
be a change in deliverables, and we organizations would need to rebudget for the amount actually awarded, and some of those deliverables might have to change. So we're prepared to be candid about that.
Cool. Let's do it. Right. I don't have anything else. I'm glad to transfer the column over R to S.
Is that a second to Jason's motion?
Yes.
And just to confirm that this is the same, does the committee want to vote for both the supplemental and the new proposal? So we'd be transferring over the recommended amounts into the partnership grant committee's recommendation. So we'd be carrying over these amounts over here.
Jason, you want to modify your motion to embrace options 1 and 2?
Sure, by all means, we'll so modify.
Will the second still stand?
It stands as amended.
All right.
Okay. Hang on 1 second. I lost my spreadsheet for the tally. All right. Iskin,
Yes.
Michele,
Yes.
Galkin,
Yes.
Cruz, Lee,
Yes.
Manarelli.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. What I can do as well is in preparation of the March 11 meeting, I will follow up with the committee members, with the applicants, and then I'll summarize any feedback from the grantees into the meeting materials for the March 11 committee meeting and try to share that in advance. Just so I think it'll confirm what we're saying and what we anticipate, but that will be captured. It's just unfortunately with the timing and then the posting deadlines, like I won't be able to have that until to the March 11 Trust Fund Commission meeting materials. So will that work for the committee? Okay, sorry, Joe, your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted one final comment about the UC Davis program, going back to the very beginning of the discussion, which was that I think, Crystal, you mentioned encouraging those who didn't make the cut this year to reapply for next year.
Mhm.
I don't think the UC Davis program will ever be able to get funded by this commission, because their objective is not consonant with why we're given this money to distribute. That's what ultimately persuaded me that it's the right call not to fund that particular program. So I guess I wouldn't over encourage them because their mission is, in my view, not consonant with the public purpose of these monies that we're given to distribute.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fair comment.
And we'll communicate that with UC Davis, but I think NLS's project, which is more of the self-help, self-service as a model that we're used to, we'll encourage them to apply for 2023, should they wish to do so.
I agree with that.
Maybe
Thanks,
just to
Crystal.
add on to Joe's point, I mean, if they were to implement a program that kind of mirrored the existing public council program, right?
Yeah.
If they're trying to address that same need, like here's a program that kind of is aimed at a somewhat similar target and that has been funded. So that might be a model that they're interested in adopting and has been funded.
That's a good point. Thanks, Jason.
I think, Eric, there was one more agenda item for discussion.
No, it's an important item. I mean, I can introduce, it's really the process. So now we've gone through this process of largely delegating to, we had a mutual calibration session for 3 proposals, at least for the option 2. But we then delegated to staff and 1 commission member the job of going through the rest of them and scoring them. So that's the approach that we followed this year. And we also followed it on the HP Homelessness Committee, similar approach. Now, last year we had a different approach. We would have, if we had followed last year's approach this year, we would have taken the 15 or so projects, and instead of having 1 commission member with staff score all of them, we would have divided them up, into teams of 3 or so, or 3 teams, and then had each team score 5 and come up with a score, and then have a session where we kind of collectively calibrate, based on the separate teams. We had thought that process was a little bit cumbersome and was yielding some inconsistent results, and it was a little difficult to navigate. But that's still on the table. So the question is, what do we want to do for the 2023 partnership grants, the process for which will be starting soon. And that's what we wanted to open it up for discussion. I mean, you can see that we have the 2 options here that I've just outlined. And they're not the only 2. We could do others. One tweak that I thought, I personally kind of like the idea of having 1 group go through all of them, because there's a lot of consistency there. But I do recognize that when we do it that way, most of the committee who's not involved in that process is kind of out of it. You don't really have much exposure to the proposals, and if you take time to read them, great, but I doubt that you really have time to do that. So, to have more of a hybrid where we keep the notion of consistency, but maybe engage more commissioners. We could tweak the process by assigning maybe 2 commissioners to work with staff. So that would engage at least 1 more commissioner in the whole review of all the projects. Or we could have 1 commissioner work with staff. But what we did this year was that we divided the 15 into 3 different sessions. We did 1 session of 5, another session of 5, another session of 5. We could invite a different commissioner to participate in each one of those separate sessions. So we would have 1 commissioner or 2 work with staff on all 15 of them, or however many come in. I guess we're probably going to get more for 2023.
Probably along the lines of 30 applications.
Yeah, so we're going to get a lot. So it'll be a big deal to review all of them. But we could have 1 or 2 commissioners work with staff to review all of them. And then in addition to that, maybe invite another committee member commissioner to participate in at least one of the sessions. So we could at least have some additional commission views on the calibration. So anyway, I guess I'll just kind of open it up for discussion. Thoughts about how to approach 2023, how you felt about this process, and whether you want to do something different for 2023. I'll shut up now and let other people talk.
I'd love to hear the perspectives for any of the new partnership grant committee members. I know this is your first exposure to the grants with PG 2.0, which is abnormal over our cycle. So now we're going to our more typical grants. So I will emphasize we have a little bit more time with this one and definitely get the follow-up as that was asked at this session. We would cover that throughout the in the planned meetings. So I'll also pause here for any comments.
I'll say on the PG 2.0 applications, I mean, I think that assuming that the level of discussion that we had, that folks felt comfortable that they had enough information and that the review was done thoroughly enough such that we approved the recommendation, would tend to indicate that the model we used was effective at reviewing and making a proposal, right? So I think there's something to be said for that. On the other hand, I mean, I think there's something to be said for like, well, if there's 30, that's a lot to ask one commissioner to commit to doing all of them. So there might be a benefit in some kind of rotation or subgrouping to break those up and make it a little bit more kind of distributed. I would be happy with either of those. I felt like the calibration session was effective and a good opportunity to get a sense for where, like, what was the important things that we were all looking out for to make a recommendation.
So this is Joe. I'm afraid I'm talking too much in this call, but one thing that I'm reflecting on is, as we've just gone through the discussion of the whatever it was, 12 or 13 programs, I don't have a great sense of what each of those programs does and why the commission rated one at 98 and another at 97 and another at right whatever the particular scores were. So we could consider having more of a presentation by the scorers to the full commission of what each program is and why it achieved the score that it did.
Mm-hmm.
So that because that might lead us to of a program that's on the margins, that might lead us to say, you know what, I'm not sure this one should fall into the 100% bucket. Maybe it should be in the 85% bucket, or maybe there should be a 90% bucket or something. That would be sort of a hybrid that we could consider.
It would theoretically, Joe, what you're saying, it could be an improvement over what we did, but I can envision that would be a very long meeting.
And I will say that kind of tracks to pre-2022 when we had the scoring rubric and we went through each individual proposal, and that meeting was 6 hours. Last year's meeting. Last year's meeting was an hour. So I think the objective of the calibration is to have that level of discussion, and the committee members really want to understand the ins and outs. Like, that would be an opportunity to do so, but to take it to a public or to a noticed meeting, for example, like that's a very long, intensive and long meeting. I just wanted to also like raise that too. It would significantly increase the process. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I agree, that's the trade-off, and I'm just thinking out loud here. I wonder if there's a way to give a more summary presentation of each program and say, look, does anyone think this merits further discussion, or should we proceed to the next one, or proceed on the basis of the staff recommendation, staff plus 1 or 2 commission member recommendation, I should say.
All right. Joe, I'll put you on pause. I think Will and Elizabeth, maybe we can see what you have to say. Will, go ahead.
So I don't have a strong opinion here yet. So I'm interested in further discussion, but my initial feeling is that having been involved in both processes, I think one of the biggest value adds that I saw from other commissioners, maybe less so from myself because I don't have the legal background that everybody has, was issue flagging in the applications hey, why is it this way? What's going on here? And questions would come up from members that I feel like added a lot to making sure that the applications were robust and that the big important questions were answered. And so I think a lot of the scoring ended up pretty close, even if it was for different reasons. I remember when I was working with Justice Murray, I think we were pretty close on a lot of things in the final score, though within the rubric, we had a lot of difference for the ones we scored. But the value of having his opinion and his experience in reviewing the application in more detail was pretty strong. And I don't know if that can be replicated in the same way, depending on how we go about this.
I think that's a good point. Well, I will say though, so your experience with Justice Mary and staff with the review team of 3, that was what the review team that was delegated authority, that's what we had. So we had individual score sheets that we brought to the table, looked at all the scores. And then that also, when you had mentioned issue spotting, that discussion happened this go around. It was just like on this review team's end versus with the committee members. So I don't know how to capture that, but I will say like that also happened because then we talked about justifications for scoring and other substantial concerns that we followed up with the organization or with the applicants with after the calibration session. Sorry, Elizabeth.
So, I mean, just to underscore what you were just saying, Crystal, Will, I think everything that you described as like a benefit of the review teams is just happening in a smaller cohort. And then just to respond to Joe, attached to the meeting materials are the profile sheets for all the applications, which gives a succinct summary that applicants provide in their applications. So I think that might be a useful tool to use. And I think maybe one thing that we can do that we've done, I think we did last year is, when we're reviewing the applications for the recommendations, instead of reviewing every single one of them, but just focusing in on, the ones that may be like on the cusp, right? There's going to be applications that are clearly qualified and the review group strongly recommends and the committee can see that it's clear that they should be funded. And then there are some that are clearly, not qualified, they didn't meet whatever requirement. And then, the committee probably doesn't need to spend a lot of time looking at those, but really just spending time on, the kind of that middle set of, there's these questions, there may be these issues and having the discussion on a smaller set, just to be able to focus in our meetings.
Like, I like the idea, Crystal, is the staff willing to have one group of staff? Well, let's set aside commissioner involvement for the moment, but is one group of staff willing to go through all 30 of them?
That's what we do regardless. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. Just because we want to ensure consistency and we are aware of the grantees and their administration. So that's what we do on the back end, regardless of process chosen.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, and I agree with Will, I think there is a lot of value to having commission active participation in this process. And so the question is, how do we want to stage that participation? Would it make sense to have, if you have 30, let's say, and you broke the 30 into 4 or 5 different sessions, maybe 5 or 6 projects a piece. Would it make sense to have a different commissioner at each one? Maybe just providing that commissioner's input to staff? Would that be helpful?
I mean, that could work. We want to be mindful of the time commitment it would take. This one was a little bit easier because there were 14 remaining. So we're recognizing it's double. Just to let you know, the calibration sessions were 2 hours every week for the month. So it was in addition to independently reviewing and scoring the application. So it's a commitment to review and score, and then have a discussion afterwards. We want to be mindful of the committee's time.
Well,
So
I mean, any commissioner that commits to doing this has got to commit to reviewing all the 5 applications or whatever it is for that session and participating fully in that one meeting at least.
Correct.
I'm just assuming people will make that commitment, at least. Well, what do the committee members think? Are the committee members willing to do that? Maybe-
Crystal, there's a public member with their hand up, Jenny Farrar.
All right, I think Jenny Farrell, I believe she's from Mental Health Advocacy Services. I'll allow, you can allow her to talk. Thanks, Kim.
What's wrong with the way we did it in 2022 with the whole partnership grant application? I like that. I thought it was efficient. Why are we?
You mean splitting it up?
Yeah.
Well, you did. I mean, some people I think thought it was because we had different teams of staff review each one, didn't we? Didn't we have different staff teams? We split the whole field up into,
right.
I thought there was, well, I mean, maybe it was good. I guess that's what we're discussing here. I think there was some sense that there was an inconsistency there between the different staff groups and that made for a little bit of a cumbersome process, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Did people not feel that way? People think that worked?
Isn't that the meeting we had that went really fast? Like the fastest one ever? Because ultimately staff, after we did our review, I remember Crystal, one of her gnarliest spreadsheets that she's made. But I mean, I just think having one committee member or two review all of these is a lot for one person. And I personally like the idea of having a few because I could really pay attention to them. But I get, is staff not wanting to do it that way? Is that why we're talking about this?
It's, I think we're also considering our other discretionary grants. So we had mentioned HBR homelessness prevention grants. So I don't know if there's any merit to having some consistency in the review process, but I think there is an opportunity to merge the two with committee members reviewing and the staff as well. You just want, I think what was really beneficial this time was a consistent sort of core of reviewing all of the applications. I don't want to, Eric, I believe you had a member of the public who wanted to speak, and maybe we can let Jenny talk, if that's okay, Eric?
Okay.
Okay. Kim, could you help me? Do we have to promote her?
She should be able to speak.
Okay.
Jenny? I gave her permission to talk. I'm not sure what the issue is.
Jenny, if you're there, we can't hear you.
Okay, so maybe we'll lower her hand for now, and then if she raises it again, we can unmute her. I want to make sure we address any hands
So
raised.
Christina, I think we're more or less coming around to your idea anyway. So
can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear me okay? This is Jenny Farrell with Mental Health Advocacy Services. I just wanted to pipe in, and I'm sure this is not even what you're supposed to do to allow me to pipe in at this point in the meeting, but on this topic of your process, first, I just wanted to say thank you for preliminarily recommending us for funding. We're really excited to do this work and partner with the courts. Second, I just wanted to share some feedback that I've been on the cut line on some of these grants too. I mean, I'll just say for the homelessness prevention grants. And it was really hard for me to hear from the State Bar staff when I talked about that, you know, our proposal wasn't even discussed by the committee. And so when Joe says, you know, I don't know what all these programs are, you know, I think you all are such wonderful people. I wanted to attend this meeting because I wanted to get a sense of the process, because I have never attended one of these meetings. I don't really know what your process is. And I've been so impressed by all of your thoughtfulness. And, you know, you all are the ones getting to make these decisions. And it feels sometimes to some of us in the legal aid community, you know, that it can feel like, well, it's the State Bar staff who are making these funding decisions, and not you all who kind of have more of the, you know, accountability to the public are the ones supposed to be making these decisions. And if it's just delegated to the staff to do the really thorough review and make recommendations, which are then just, you know, 100% approved, it feels a little bit more like the staff are making the decisions. And not to say I have anything wrong with, anyone on the staff. I think all of the State Bar staff are amazing, thoughtful people as well. But it was a hard pill for me to swallow when I heard that, well, you could watch the recording of the committee meeting, but they didn't even discuss your proposal. And to be quite honest, they probably didn't even read the summary sheets. So even just reading the summary sheets, I think would go a long way in making the applicants feel like, each proposal is really being considered by the commission, who really are the ones who are supposed to be making the decisions. I just wanted to give you guys that input, and I really, really appreciate it. I don't want you to have to sit through 6-hour meetings. That sounds awful. I completely feel you on that. So thank you all for your service, and that's all I wanted to contribute.
Well, thank you. I want to stress that there are commissioners involved in detailed review of these proposals, even if they don't get discussed in detail at the committee meeting. We do not fully delegate to staff ever. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, in light of Ms. Farrell and Mr. Lee's comments earlier about reviewing, I wonder if we can still do some of the calibration work, but then send the commissioners, or provide them a link to the full proposals. And maybe we're not reviewing them for scoring, but then reviewing them so we have some insight into what the programs are deeper than kind of the summary sheets. So when we see the scoring proposed, we can decide, we can review for ourselves whether we think we have any market objections to what the scoring from post calibration is.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jason. I just wanted to say, as a committee member, commissioner, you do have access to the Smart Simple portal and all of the applications. I'll make that a little bit more explicit for 2023 and be sure to do that beforehand. And so you have access to the full application. But generally you would. So apologies if we didn't communicate that or that information.
That may be more of a function of our email challenges that we've been struggling with than anything else.
So can I get back to Christina's point? So Christina, you like the idea of maybe each commissioner taking a few of the applications, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I think that's more or less what I was kind of coming around to. Maybe I wasn't very clear. The idea that I was thinking about was that there would be a group of staff that would review all 30 of them, but then we would take that 30, maybe like what we did in 2022, and split that 30 amongst the committee. So Christina, you would take 5 and whatever, Jason would take 5 and whatever. And then we would just assign you to whatever session was going to be discussing those 5. And so you could participate in the calibration of those 5 along with staff. And then when staff went on to the next 5, somebody else would be involved in that calibration. So along with staff. So the only difference between what I just proposed and what you did in 2022 is that for this one, you would have a consistent group of staff looking at all 30. Does that sound? How does that sound?
I feel like we should ask staff.
Danielle, sorry, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, Danielle.
Yeah. So just in response to what Eric just proposed, I am not opposed to it at all. The only thing I would flag is that would still not be in a committee meeting, in a public meeting. And I don't know if that is or is not a consideration, or does or doesn't, respond to Ms. Farrell's comments that the committee as a whole did.
Well, yeah, you're right. So I think we need to do 2 things. We need to do something else to respond to the comments we just heard. We would need to also tweak our meeting process a bit, and then which we can do. We could maybe do more extensive discussion of each proposal, or just do something to more comprehensively discuss the proposals at the meeting, in addition to what I'm suggesting about the pre-meeting process, the calibration process.
So we used to do that.
Yeah, so
that's what took all day.
I was going to say, just in the typical grant cycle, we typically do have a meeting to discuss tentative funding recommendations, and then that's where we would have back and forth to talk about any particular issues. It's just timeframe for PG 2.0 is severely compressed. So this meeting is really 2 meetings in one, but we will have a meeting to fit sort of the follow-up and discuss it and then finalize it in June. We have a lot of hands raised. Eric, you can, I don't know if you want to figure out.
Joe, Elizabeth, those are the 2 I see. So Joe, why don't you go first?
Oh, thank you, Eric. Well, first I wanted to thank the member of the public, I think it was Farrell, for some very helpful input and very well spoken as well. And I guess I want to be clear that I'm only raising the question of how much information and data the individual commissioners should get in the course of these meetings and in the course of this process. And sometimes I engage a little bit in hyperbole, and obviously it's not the case if we didn't have any information about the programs that we are approving here. But I do think that it would be useful in this meeting to have a brief discussion, and I think it could be like a 5-minute summary of each program and how it got the score that it did. And there may be somewhere, as was, I think Elizabeth made the point earlier, where we very quickly reach a consensus that the staff recommendation in conjunction with the committee member is appropriate, and others may lead to a longer discussion. So we could even have something kind of similar to a consent calendar where some program like the one that got the 98-point score, that's probably not going to require a lot of discussion. Whereas others that are more on the cusp, as Elizabeth suggested, would require more discussion. And I don't think that would be a 6-hour meeting, because I think the discussion of each program could be it would be appropriate for it to be summary and level. But that would flag potential issues and allow us also to discuss the programs where there is more room for discussion or potentially different views.
Elizabeth?
I was just going to say that if the committee wants to be responsive to Ms. Farrell's comments, that it seems like the option for that is to review using the 2022 process would be the most responsive, where there are working groups with committee members on working groups participating in reviewing of a small set of the applications, and staff having reviewed the entire set to provide that continuity in terms of understanding what the entire set looks like, so that if there comparison is needed, that information and knowledge is there.
Elizabeth, is that the proposal I'm talking about, or is it something different?
I think it's the proposal you're talking about. I think we're just using different words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Will.
Thank you. And also thank you to Ms. Farrell for sharing that opinion. It's always cool when someone from these organizations that exist mostly on paper for me come and speak. And I think just hearing what Elizabeth had to say reminds me of one of the human factors that comes into play that's very subtle, which I think Elizabeth and Ms. Farrell both kind of touch on, which is if we review it and we really like a program, then commission members automatically act as an advocate for seeing that program happen. Or if they have a lot of red flags, they express their concerns strongly. I think I saw that with Justice Murray a few times, where it's like, what is this? And it was really, that too was helpful, because I think initially I was thinking, well, we should be doing less, because if we have set up the rubric properly, then the transparency that people need should come through that, and we should be applying this objective standard as much as possible. But there's just so many factors, and I know that the rubric is still being tweaked and we're still reviewing that process, that I guess I'm falling into the same camp as Eric here, which is and Christina, the reviewing it more fully, digging in there. Thank you.
Crystal, do we need a resolution on this process?
No, it's a since it's a process thing, I think we just want to confirm we're on the same page, so then like I know how to follow up after the submission deadline of March 18. I will flag for both options. We indicated that we need to do a potentially schedule a calibration session. I think similar to what we did in January. This would be a little bit different than 2022 because calibration was done in the review team's side. It was helpful for the committee altogether to discuss the different viewpoints on the 3 applications. So I would want to add on as a point for the process to have an initial calibration very soon after the March 18 deadline, just to ensure that everyone's on the same page before they get their assigned subset of applications to review.
Okay. So if we got 30 applications, we would take 3 of them and calibrate them as a group, kind of like what we did this time, right?
Mhm.
And then we would split the remaining 27 amongst the committee members to work with staff on at different sessions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there any committee members who object to this, who are unwilling to, who don't really want to take on taking 5 or so projects and studying them in depth and working on the calibration with staff? Okay, well, maybe that's what we'll do.
Okay, and then just to confirm, is it one commissioner for a stack, or are we looking to double up? Or I guess we'll just see in terms of what the end result is, but maybe
Let's just see how many, let's just see how many projects come in and we'll have to act accordingly.
It might be interesting to kind of mix them up and have everybody be on 2 teams with different people.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Then I'll reach out to the committee later on just to confirm that there's any potential conflicts, so we can recuse you from reviewing a certain set, or we won't assign a certain proposal to you. So that will be after the March.
How many committee members? So Judge Jaskell, were you participate in this? You're an advisor, I guess, but
Yeah, but I participated. I did the
Good.
same work that the other committee members did.
Good, that would be great.
Okay. This doesn't require a vote, just we're talking about process, so it's not a decision.
I had if we're done with that piece, I had a question on the process. It's just something I've been thinking about a bunch in terms of making sure that we are constantly refining what we've come up with for especially with the rubric, because I think everyone recalls there's been a lot of conversation on the rubric and making sure that it is transparent and that we are consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to think through, I don't really want to reopen the conversation about the rubric because it feels like an endless hole where there's all these different definitions and viewpoints, but there does seem like room for a retrospective where we ask, is the rubric accomplishing what we want, which in our case, which is substantially improving access to justice for the indigent. And where it feels like we do the reviews and then we send out the money and we never go back and look at, hey, did we accomplish what we want? Was our rubric effective in getting everything done that we wanted? Was it a cost-effective project? Did they hit all of their numbers? Did we ask the right questions to get the sorts of answers and the evaluation that we want? And I was sort of struck when at the homelessness prevention committee meeting that there's all these federal reporting requirements where they really want to know what actually got done, how many people were served, and they look at that, and that's a priority. And it felt like there might be room in our process to review what we get back, whether they hit their own goals, because we asked them to set out their goals, their budget, how many people they want to serve, and whether that gets hit. And maybe this is happening on the staff side, but it feels like it would be worthy of discussion and looking at how much got done and whether we accomplished the commission and this particular committee's goal. And I don't know if it's something where it would be helpful for me to mock something up of what I think that would look like, or if there's something that already exists, or if it would be appropriate for it to be its own discussion at another time. But I was really interested in making sure that we close the loop for the rubrics and the grants, and we look at the outcomes.
Yes, so I guess couple of things. So that's a tall order, and I think we're going to have to approach it piecemeal. A couple of things that had happened since our last discussion: the 2022 applications or 2023 now references past performance. I know that was something that was raised when we looked at the rubric and the RFP last year. So we do have some questions related to most recent evaluations and how projects did, so we can see that individually. The evaluations for the 2021 grant year are released, and they will be due on March 11th. So I think it's planned for a future meeting. It'll happen, that the timing is a little bit funky, but it will be presented to the committee once the data has been analyzed and summarized, so we can see, at least for 2021, where the monies are. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the 2022 are now subject to mid-year reporting requirements. So we'll be able to view and see that data towards the later end of this year. So that piece is happening on the staff end, but in terms of bringing it back to the committee, I think that's something that we're definitely trying to do for this year, at least to look back in terms of what outcomes have been achieved and what money spent, et cetera, for the committee to see. And we haven't had that opportunity last year, and I think that's something we're looking forward to doing this year.
I mean, obviously, you're certainly correct. We need to be looking at the rubric constantly to be sure that it is right, that we're hitting the right dimensions. We did take a look at the rubric again at one of our earlier meetings for the 2023 grant process. I thought we did that. Was it our January meeting or one of the recent meetings? We did look at the rubric and discuss it and approve it for 2023. I'm looking at you, Crystal. I think, just tell me if I'm wrong.
We made some adjustments to definitions in the scoring rubric categories. I think Will's question also talked about outcomes and where's the partnership grant money spent on what projects and et cetera. Right. We don't see that till the evaluative phase, and because we wait until the end of the grant year and we need to build in time for staff analysis and to provide a succinct summary to the committee, it's a little bit staggered. So we'll be able to present on 2021 data, maybe some mid-year for this year towards the end of the year. So that's planned. That's what the plan is.
So we're going to have a meeting to discuss the evaluations.
It'll be part of one of our agenda, one of our regularly scheduled meetings, not a unique one. We just need to, I guess, wait till we get the data and then put it together and then do a little presentation for the committee.
Well, that's important.
And just as a reminder, I do think that Crystal has made presentations on the evaluation data in the past to the committee, so it is available. And we've been talking with Judicial Council about, enhancing all of our evaluation and our reporting of it. So there is more to come.
I believe there's actually a meeting isn't there a convening on February 25th, at least with projects, to talk about evaluation data and how they're supposed to submit it?
Yes, it's geared towards the grantee, just to go over all of the grantee reporting requirements. There is a lot happening. I think Wilmad mentioned the rigorous HP reporting requirements. So we're going to provide an overview and get some questions from the grantees on the 25th. So, is
that something that, I know that an invitation was sent out to the HP committee to participate in that. Is that something that others on the commission could participate in if they wanted to, or at least attend?
Yeah, I don't think we have any restrictions on attendance. If anyone wants to listen in, it's on February 25 from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
So, Will, I don't know whether you got that invitation, whether you're interested in participating, but that might be somewhat responsive to what you're concerned about. It's certainly a valid concern to be sure that we're actually accomplishing what we think we're accomplishing.
Yeah, when we have such big process systems, all of that, making sure that we can go back and look at whether it's accomplished what we want. I've seen in other organizations that it doesn't happen. They talk, they do the reporting, but then they don't action it. And I'm hoping that we can, and it's really good to hear that there will be additional reporting and we'll have a chance to talk about it and maybe evaluate that reporting in the context of improvements to the rubric, if any, to make sure that we capture any problems and flag things that need to be flagged. So thank you.
What else? Crystal?
Oh, yeah, I'll skim over this briefly. This is just the partnership grants timeline as a reminder. We're in February now, so on February 8th, we had office hours for potential applicants. We had about 20 folks join that call just to get general information about the 2023 grants. So we're just waiting for applications for 2023. As I mentioned, evaluations for the 2021 grantees are due in March. Then we'll have the Trust Fund Commission meeting on the 11th. RFP deadline for 2023 is on March 18th. And then I'll send a doodle poll for some dates for the initial calibration session. We're targeting first week of April, so or early April. So I'll send dates following this meeting. As a reminder, PG 2.0 for both options 1 and 2, April 1 is the grant start date. So it's very soon. So since we've confirmed the recommendations, I'll move them forward and then present them at the March 11 Trust Fund Commission meeting. That's the main piece. I also did want to flag for June 9th. Well, due to scheduling conflict, we'll need to update that meeting date. So I'll include those dates in the doodle poll as well. We'll just need to reschedule it sometime prior to the Trust Fund Commission meeting on the 17th. So I'll offer those alternate dates following this meeting. So that's it. I'll stop sharing screen.
Well, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge the great work that Crystal's done, and really all of staff. Well, Colleen and I'm seeing Danielle and Dan really worked hard on trying to get these projects evaluated, get all the information uploaded and organized so that we could access it. And, you know, really, I personally appreciate it very much that you guys did a great job, all of you, particularly Crystal, who led this effort, but everybody. And thanks to the committee members for your participation as well. Will?
I echo that sentiment, and I just wanted to add that I just saw the email about Bob Planthold, and I wanted to acknowledge and honor all of his work. I always enjoyed seeing and hearing his voice, and was at a loss for words upon that. And that's all. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, Bob was a real valued member of the commission. He's a unique guy, a strong fighter for the disabled, and it's a real loss. Sorry to see him. Those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Bob, a longtime member of the commission, passed away recently. And his accomplishments were acknowledged in some articles in the San Francisco press. In addition to being an active member of the commission, he was also involved in all kinds of city activities, and was quite a guy. So thank you for mentioning that, Will. All right, well, are we adjourning?
I believe we are adjourning. Our next meeting will be due to the doodle poll. Wait to see which meetings we have quorum, but again, it'll be early April for initial calibration. Everyone will be sent the information for which applications are selected for the session. So same process, utilizing the rubric and bringing your scores to that April meeting. So thank you in advance. Thank you everyone for your participation in PG 2.0. And as we transition to 2023, looking forward to our hopefully new and updated review process.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.